Hello doll fans and welcome back to Beauty Inside a Box. Today we are talking about the fairest one of all, Snow White. We are going to be looking back through pretty much every single Snow White doll which has ever been made and see how they evolve, how they change. The original Snow White film came out in 1937. It's nearly 90 years old. And it is famous for being the first ever feature-length Hollywood animated film. Although at the time a lot of people were skeptical and were calling it Disney's folly, expecting it to be a massive failure. Luckily for Disney, it was a massive, massive success. But Disney had spent a lot of money on this film. Walt Disney even had to remortgage his house to pay for it. So Walt Disney probably wanted to make as much money as he could on his investment. So he would happily lease the Snow White license to whoever wanted it, and that meant that there was a lot of Snow White merchandise and even Snow White dolls as far back as 1937. I think Snow White the character makes a really good doll. I love her primary colours and she has a nice round cute face. She doesn't have very long hair, but I think her hair is really cute. And often she has her cape, and I love a cape. The longer the better. I hate it when they give her that little, short, stumpy cape. Awful. Before we go any further, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're new here. Check me out on Instagram and TikTok. And also consider supporting me on Patreon. I have loads of exclusive videos on Patreon, and your financial support would mean a lot to me. You can support me from just $3. So what do you have to lose? Anyway, let's talk about the history and evolution of the fairest one of all, Snow White. In 1934, a couple years before Snow White was released, the Ideal Toy Company started making Shirley Temple dolls, and they were extremely popular. So, in 1937, when Snow White was released, the Ideal Toy Company decided to make dolls of the first ever Disney princess. They sometimes even used Shirley Temple's body and face mold to create the Snow White dolls. Teenage fashion dolls weren't really invented until the 1950s, so many of the early Snow White dolls looked a lot like babies or toddlers. The Ideal dolls used mohair, which was created from goat's hair. The dolls were made of a material called composition. Composition was a mixture of glue, sawdust, and/or other substances, wood flour, wood pulp, cornstarch, resin, and more. Dolls with heads made from this mixture were prominent during the 1920s through the 1940s because it was less fragile and less expensive than porcelain. They remained popular until the Second World War, when plastic took over in the market. The dolls came in sizes from 11 inches to 24 inches. The Ideal Toy Company dolls also had sleepy eyes that could open and close. This was quite a new invention at the time. I love how this doll has the Snow White logo and an image of the Seven Dwarfs printed on her dress. It kind of reminds me of this Simba doll, which would be released much later. They would later also make dolls with molded hair instead of brushable hair, and they would also make cloth dolls. The English company Chad Valley would also make cloth dolls of Snow White. In 1938 until pretty much today, Madame Alexander would make Snow White dolls. They came in a variety of sizes from 13 inches to 18 inches. Back then, the colours and designs of the dolls would differ quite drastically from the character's design in the film. I'm not sure why this is. I feel like maybe toy manufacturers didn't get much access to images of the character, so they just had to kind of design the dolls from memory. I don't really know. The Madame Alexander dolls would sometimes wear a pink and blue dress, or sometimes a brown and yellow dress, or this doll wears an almost entirely yellow dress. And the dress is a completely different style from what we see in the film. The Madame Alexander dolls would use either mohair, or sometimes they would even use human hair. In a catalogue from 1939, you can see that the 18-inch doll cost $9.50, which would have been really, really expensive back in the day. They continued to make Snow White dolls pretty much to this day. From 1938 to 1940, R.G. Kruger, Inc. produced cloth dolls of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. These are actually really cute, I think. It's hard to tell what the original colours were meant to be because these dolls are so faded, but they look cute. In 1938, Knickerbocker made Snow White dolls in several different sizes from 11 inches to 20 inches. They also made this incredible carrier case for the Snow White doll set. Similar to the Madame Alexander dolls, they made dolls with blue and pink or brown and yellow dresses. They also made dolls with stripes on the dresses. Kind of random. Knickerbocker also made dolls with mohair and sleepy closing eyes. So pretty much all of these companies continued to make Snow White dolls for a while. And then in 1951, Duchess Doll Corp made some adorable little Disney dolls. Some of these dolls look really off-model, but Snow White has to be one of the better looking ones. I think this actually kind of looks like her. This is what I mean, I think, because of Snow White's like round face, she actually really suits being a doll. In 1957, the Deluxe Reading Company created a Snow White doll. She was 22 inches tall and had eyes which could close. The costume wasn't exactly movie accurate with a short skirt and buttons on the front. The doll was advertised to be made out of miracle vinyl, which was completely unbreakable. I'd like to put that to the test. Many people believe that Baikin was the first company to make fashion dolls of Snow White, but I actually found that in 1978, the English toy company which made the Cindy doll, which was called Pedigree Toys, actually created some Snow White fashion dolls. And these dolls are extremely rare. They appear to have the same face and body mold which was used for the Cindy doll. I also found this talking Snow White doll made by the toy company Tomy. I couldn't find much information about this doll, but people believe it was made in the 1970s. This Snow White doll could actually talk and say several different phrases. Now, in 1983, the toy company Baikin made some of the first Barbie-sized Snow White fashion dolls. Like I said before, many people believe these to be the first Snow White fashion dolls. They're definitely the first kind of popular, widely available Snow White fashion dolls. I actually have one here. Her hair is a little bit crazy. This one actually came as part of a fashion pack. She came with a couple different outfits, which I thought was really fun. When I first saw her on eBay, I thought she was a fake. I thought she was a fake Snow White doll, but then I found out that she's not. And you know what? She's actually like in really good condition. This doll is really well made, even though the face kind of looks like Michael Jackson to me. Yeah, I thought they were fake, but they are official Disney Snow White dolls. They came in 2 different box designs, and Snow White seems to have had 2 different face molds as well. I actually think the other one, the later one, is a lot cuter. This line was quite extensive. They also made Evil Queen dolls, Old Hag dolls, Prince dolls, Dwarf dolls, and a wedding set. This is one of the first times we get to see a doll company imagine what Snow White's wedding dress would look like. Obviously, Snow White never appears in the film with her wedding dress, so toy companies get to use some creative license when they're designing a wedding dress for her, and I like to see what kind of wedding dresses they come up with. Baikin also made a whole bunch of action packs, and these look incredibly 80s. There were also a whole bunch of porcelain Snow White dolls made. There were some released by Jerry McCloud in 1983, and I have to say, I think the prince has such an 80s hairstyle. It's so funny. And then in 1993, Franklin Mint made porcelain dolls, and also Brass Key started making porcelain dolls of Snow White, and they made loads of different Snow White dolls, and I love some of the outfits they reimagined for her. I actually think these dolls are quite imaginative. It's a shame they're made out of porcelain. I'm just not into porcelain dolls. If these dolls were made of plastic, I would definitely consider buying one. In 1999, a company called Ashton Drake made some porcelain dolls of Snow White. They only made 7,500. Anyway, in the early 90s, Mattel, the company which makes Barbie, got the license to create Disney dolls, Disney Barbie dolls. The 90s Disney dolls are definitely my favourite Disney dolls. They're stunning. And in 1992, they made a Snow White themed doll line.
It's beautiful Snow White.
She's so pretty.
Taking care of her friends, the 7 dwarfs.
Each has a magic surprise.
Nobody wants a kiss from you. Wow, look at all the magic you can do.
All dwarfs change color with warm or icy water. Snow White doll and dwarf sold separately or in sets.
I have one of the first Mattel Snow White dolls here, and I absolutely love her. In the 90s, Mattel used to put these, like, sparkles all over their outfits. I think they're really cute and they're really nostalgic to me. Also, her face is so adorable. I love how they draw these little sparkles in her eyes as well. Also, her dress is transformable. She's got her peasant dress underneath. Just a great doll. Some beautiful Snow White dolls from the 90s include Special Sparkle Snow White. She literally looks like she just stepped off the Disney Electric Light Parade. She has little plastic gems in her eyes. I'd also love to one day own Happy Birthday Snow White. I love this Princess Stories Snow White doll. I just love the way the material moves. And the colours are so bright and vibrant. In the year 2000, the Disney Princess line was created, and pretty much every Disney doll after this point would be branded with the Disney Princess logo. The My Favourite Fairy Tale Snow White doll would originally be released without the Princess logo, but would then be re-released with the Princess logo as she transitioned into being an official Disney princess. In the 2000s, Mattel would make some beautiful Snow White dolls, like Sparkling Snow White, Princess Party Snow White, Dancing Ballerina Snow White, Dreamtime Snow White, and Charming Princess Snow White. Mattel also made some beautiful collector's dolls, like 60th Anniversary Snow White in 1997. I have to say, this is definitely my favourite Snow White doll ever. She's just beautiful. Enchanted Princess Snow White in 2000, Holiday Princess Snow White in 1998, and Wedding Snow White in 1997. We don't often get to see Snow White in any other outfit other than her yellow, blue and red dress. So I really love it when doll companies imagine a new outfit for her. I think it's really fun. This wedding dress is so 90s, it's actually hilarious. In 2005, Mattel gave Snow White a brand new face mold. Then, in 2006, they also gave her and some of the other princesses a new, slightly shorter body mold, which would become kind of the standard for Snow White dolls. After this point, a lot of the Snow White dolls would be a little bit shorter than other princesses like Cinderella or Belle. In 2008, to celebrate the re-release of Snow White on DVD, Mattel released a line of Snow White dolls. These were kind of separate from the Disney Princess line. They had a red colour scheme. I really like how many of the dolls give Snow White a kind of red and yellow gradient effect on her dress. I'd really like to own one of these dolls. In 2012, Snow White got another new face mold, and Mattel started giving the Disney princesses plastic painted on tops, which was a massive downgrade and I hate. In 2013, right before Mattel lost the rights to make Disney dolls, they actually released a Disney signature line of dolls, which included a really beautiful Snow White doll. I absolutely love the box design for this whole line, especially the Snow White doll. She also got a cute new face mold, but I think it was too little too late, and the rights to make Disney dolls went to Hasbro. Before we talk about Hasbro, we have to talk about the Snow White dolls that were made specifically for the Disney Store and the Disney parks. Now, in 1996, the Disney Store started releasing their own dolls separate from the Mattel dolls, which were being sold in most stores. I'm surprised Mattel wasn't annoyed about that. The first dolls were called the Disney Classic Collection, and most of these dolls look a little bit weird and very off-model, but the Snow White one actually looks really good. I think the problem is they've kind of squashed the heads of a lot of the Disney princesses. They've given them really round faces. But like I've said before, Snow White has a round face, so that style kind of suited her. I have the Classics Collection Snow White doll right here, and She's so cute. She's so cute. And this dress is like really nicely made. I love the nice long cape. There's like so many different layers to her skirt. She even has like a kind of underskirt. Just really cute, like a lovely, beautifully made doll. They continue to make dolls like this all the way into the 2000s. I love this wedding dress that they designed for Snow White here. I love the sleeves. Interesting kind of medieval design. And I also love this doll, which comes with an extra pink dress. I think that's really cute. In about the year 2000, when the Disney Princess line was released, the Disney Store dolls would get a bit of a redesign. And I love these dolls, but I don't think these dolls were ever released in Europe, because I don't remember seeing them. I think this style of doll might have only been sold in America, because, like I said, I never saw these dolls as a kid. But I do remember going to New York, and they had this style of doll in these kind of like tubes. They were packed in like tubes, and I remember really wanting them. But yeah, we never had the tube dolls in the UK, I don't think. And these dolls were really creative, and they designed loads of really fun outfits for Snow White, like Floral Princess Snow White, Royal Masquerade Snow White, Ballerina Snow White, the wardrobe set, and a collector's Snow White doll. Meanwhile, in Europe, we were getting Snow White dolls that looked like this. Ew! Don't get me wrong, I have a special place in my heart for these Snow White dolls, but they're not it. They look weird. I have one here. You can see the face mold, it's just not giving. It's definitely not giving Snow White, that's for sure. But the outfit is lovely. I love this cape. In Europe, we got a lot of interesting Disney dolls. Like, for example, in 2001, the company Simba got the rights to create Disney dolls. I remember at the time really not liking these dolls because I didn't think they were movie accurate, but now I'm really nostalgic for these dolls, and I actually think they're quite nice. And they were also very budget friendly, like these dolls were quite cheap. Although I do remember the costumes on the dolls not fitting very well. I have a Simba doll here, and you know, she's really cute. Again, the costume like doesn't fit very well. And I remember as a kid finding the fact that she has like these clavicle bones here really weird. I don't know why, it used to like freak me out. The face mold is really nice, and you know, this is like a really nice budget doll. Simba also made a nice Snow White doll in a golden dress. They made Charming Princess Snow White. They made Forest Friends Snow White in this really cute pink dress. It's really hard to find pictures of, but they also made a hair play Snow White doll with like really, really long Rapunzel hair. You don't get to see that very often. There were quite a lot of weird Snow White dolls in the like 90s and 2000s. I mean, Disney on Ice. The Disney on Ice Snow White dolls are cursed. They look like they've just seen a ghost. In 2010, the German company Zaff Creations released a kind of weird-looking Snow White doll, which was like child age. In 2009, Tonner made a beautiful Snow White doll. This is a limited edition doll. They only made 1,000, but I actually think this doll looks really nice. Also in 2009, the Disney Store dolls had a redesign. I feel like Disney must have changed manufacturers or something, or maybe it was just a redesign, but the Disney Store dolls completely changed. And I remember when I first saw these dolls being in love with them. They were really nicely made. They had really movie accurate face molds, beautiful soft hair. And these are kind of what the Disney Store dolls still look like to this day. 2009 is when people kind of agree that modern Disney Store dolls began, if that makes sense. I had the beautiful basic Snow White doll, but they also made a wardrobe set which came with different outfits. And we get to see Snow White's wedding dress again. This time it has an empire waistline. I've seen quite a few imaginings of Snow White's wedding dress with an empire waistline. I like that. I was looking at old concept designs for Snow White, which were created before the original film came out. And some of them include Snow White wearing an empire waistline. and even images of her wedding dress. So I think this is where the inspiration for the Empire waistline comes from. And pretty much every single year after 2009, Disney would re-release the Snow White dolls, making small changes every time. Sometimes she'd have her cape, sometimes she wouldn't, sometimes the dress would be shorter, sometimes it would be longer. In recent years, they've only changed the Disney Store dolls every other year. It's kind of slowed down a little bit. But here you can see all of the different Snow White dolls since 2009. Also in 2009, Snow White had the honour of being the first ever limited edition 17-inch Disney Store collector doll. And look, she has an Empire waistline. I think this doll is stunning. Since then, the Disney Store has made loads of limited edition Snow White dolls, like the first designer collection doll in 2011. I really want this doll. Her dress looks like so floaty, and I love her cape, of course. The Disney Fairy Tale Couples set in 2013, the Disney Fairy Tales Good and Evil set in 2015, the Premiere series in 2018, and the Masquerade series in 2024. Also, in 2011, the Disney Animators Snow White doll was released. This line was extremely popular and still runs to this day. Many dolls have been released before, like reimagining Snow White as a toddler, but the Disney Animators series was the first time that Disney animators actually designed the dolls to make them as accurate as they can be. Now, back to Hasbro. In 2016, Hasbro released their first dolls after taking over the Disney license from Mattel. And these dolls were quite polarizing. They released an incredibly cartoony version of Snow White, which a lot of fans really didn't like. I also had this doll which had a magical story skirt, which I actually thought was like quite a fun idea. I personally quite liked the original Hasbro dolls. At least they had removable fashions, and they were doing something a bit new and creative with the Disney Princess license. But I have to say, in 2017, they released a new line of Disney Princess basic dolls, and I think these are the best Disney Princess dolls that Hasbro ever released. They had slightly smaller, more naturally proportioned heads, and they had beautiful, like, watercolor gowns. Again, the costumes were removable. I really like these dolls. Hasbro had clearly been listening to the criticisms as well, because they made the dolls look a lot less cartoony. Sadly, in 2018, the Hasbro dolls had a massive downgrade. This is honestly maybe the worst Snow White doll I think that has ever been made. It has like this kind of plasticky, glitter-covered top. I just really don't like it. I think it's awful. It looks so cheap. In 2019, they got a very slight upgrade, I think, when they added like these plastic jewel tops. Hasbro also made a cooking set for Snow White, and of course they made Wreck-It Ralph dolls. But sadly, Snow White never got to be part of the Style series. I really liked the Style series, and I would have loved to see her in this line. In 2016, in celebration of the opening of Shanghai Disneyland, a limited edition Snow White doll was released, and she's beautiful. In 2017, a Saks Fifth Avenue doll was released to celebrate Snow White's 80th anniversary, and again, this doll is stunning. This doll is stunning. I mean, she's incredibly expensive, but she's really beautiful. In 2023, Mattel regained the rights to make Disney dolls and have been making incredibly underwhelming Snow White dolls ever since. I mean, the face mold is good. I will say the face mold is good, but overall, the Mattel dolls are just like very low quality. And that brings us to today with the release of the Snow White live-action remake, which has had a lot of negative press. I think Rachel Ziegler is a great choice for Snow White. I haven't seen the film. The reviews have been overwhelmingly negative. But I think the songs sound good. I really hate CGI, and it looks like it relies on CGI way too much. And the new songs they've added aren't in keeping with the style of the original film, which I think is a shame. But like I said, I think Rachel Ziegler is a great Snow White, and the dolls which Mattel have made, are very expensive, but they're really beautiful. Like, Mattel kind of ate when making these dolls. They are really beautiful. So there we have it, doll fans. That is the entire history and evolution of Snow White fashion dolls, the very first Disney princess. This is a bit of a series on my channel, so make sure you check out the other videos in this series. Also, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to my channel if you're new here, check me out on Instagram and TikTok, and also consider supporting me on Patreon, and I will see you real soon, doll fans. Bye. Thank you so much to Siren Kelly, Nikki, Sunny, Bobby and Cheryl, Imani, Tracy, Jico, Patty Heiss, Anna, Jordan, Cynthia, Raina Ray, Petra, Desi, Michael, @dolls_on-the-go, Jasper, Lillian Lish, Michael and Russ, Amber Rodriguez, Natalie, Doreen, Lexi, Jeremy, Shannon, Angelique, Spooky Mama Baker, Vito and Logan, and Sophie. And thank you to all my other Patreon supporters. Your support means everything.